Tonight on the Daily Drum, as thousands more federal workers face the reality they too could soon be without a job, states across the country are scrambling, trying to figure out how to handle the influx of the unemployed. Good evening. Welcome to a special abbreviated edition of the Daily Drum. I'm Ebony McMorris. Harold Fisher has the night off. Well, this evening we'll drill down on the economic impact of these firings, including the role of unemployment insurance and how the surge will affect the system. My guest, Michele Evermore, Senior Fellow at the National Academy of Social Insurance. Michele also served in the Biden administration in the U.S. Department of Labor. First, I want to go through some facts. To date, while there are no firm official numbers of exactly how many workers have been let go in the DOGE upheaval, estimates have been between 100,000 to 200,000. Tens of thousands of others could be fired in the next 2 weeks. 75,000 federal workers have accepted the so-called buyout. Michele, thank you for joining us on today to talk about this topic.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Let me just say, hearing all that, hearing those numbers, and I know you have been trying to deal and sift through some of this minutia on a daily basis. What's been your frame of mind throughout this whole process?
Well, what we know about economic pain is that it spreads. It's contagious, just like a virus. And so one person getting laid off means they're not buying the goods and services they would ordinarily have been buying, right? And, we know that a lot of these people that have been laid off are, maybe lower in seniority, so probably aren't getting paid that much anyway. So desperately need their unemployment insurance benefits to work for them.
Let's talk about the immediate impact on state unemployment insurance systems when a large number of federal workers are laid off.
Right. So state unemployment agencies are not prepared for this kind of surge, particularly in Washington, D.C. The UI agency there is a great agency with great leadership, but they've just been starved for so many years. It's going to be really hard for them to handle this kind of influx.
So how do federal layoffs, when we look at the overall unemployment rate, how do you see these federal layoffs influencing that number? And do you think, I'm just constantly thinking about how states are going to be able to prepare for this overwhelming amount of layoffs that we're seeing?
So far, we haven't seen a huge uptick in initial claims. We've seen a pretty big uptick in initial claims in Washington, D.C., around the nation, less so. And I think a lot of that is because some of the layoffs have begun as being placed on administrative leave.
Right.
Many people took the fork in the road. Those people are not going to show up in the unemployment rolls until they stop getting paid, in which case they may or may not be considered involuntarily unemployed, depending on the state, depending on the fact pattern about why they chose to pick the fork in the road. A lot of people thought they were going to be fired anyway. And in that case, they may be still eligible for unemployment insurance. And a lot of people took the fork because they felt they were being asked to do things that were illegal or doing things that went against their ethos as federal workers. So everything in unemployment insurance is fact-based and individual-based. And state workers have to take the time to make the right decisions about everybody who comes through the door. And that's why it's going to be difficult, because state agencies really work hard to get this right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, as we talk about how prepared states are to handle this influx of claims, which, as you're saying, we're not seeing quite yet, but given the current resources and staffing levels, especially, how do you view that in terms of this DMV area?
Something a lot of people don't realize is the ripples of the pandemic. So, in 2020, we went from 211 initial claims the first week of March to 6.6 million, completely unprecedented. And states, the highest on record in history before that was 690,000 in 1983. So states for a year paid way more benefits per week than they had in the history of the program. That led to attrition. People calling their state agencies at the end of their rope, talking about suicide, talking about violence, right?
Yeah.
And state agency workers were scarred by that, right? That's not a normal jobs situation, and so we've lost a lot of good workers, and the workers that remain from 2020 carry with them that sort of trauma, right? And on top of that, we started the pandemic with a 50-year low in administrative funding. What that means is, even throughout the pandemic, when states got additional funding, it was really hard to figure out what to do with it, since they couldn't hire up very quickly, right? So things, and also, I would add that states haven't gotten enough money to properly upgrade their technology, or when they do get the money, they're faced with a limited set of vendors and a limited set of ways to improve their technology. So even states that have upgraded still have technology issues.
So on top of the staff shortages, we're talking about some infrastructure issues. So to those listening, how long do you think from the time of filing should it take for people to get a payment?
Ideally, it should take 2 to 3 weeks to get a payment in normal times, right? There was a Supreme Court
times.
Right. There was a Supreme Court case in 1971 that said basically states should issue a payment on time, whether or not they hear back from the employer about the separation cause. Now that applies to regular unemployment insurance. And with UCFE, I think we're going to be seeing it take states months, maybe even to pay out benefits. What should happen, and there's been guidance that came out from the Department of Labor, if the agency does not hear back from the employers, from the claimant's employer, the employee should be able to fill out an affidavit after they've been waiting for 12 days. So, whenever you apply, start counting on the clock. And if you aren't hearing anything within 12 days, it would be helpful to get documents together to substantiate what you've been paid for the last 18 months and your reason for separation, so that you can be prepared to fill out an affidavit.
Michele, walk our listeners through and talk about this filing process for unemployment insurance, because for many of these workers, this could be their very first time having to do this. What's involved? Give us some more of those do's and don'ts, what they need to do, particularly because of what we're facing right now. And it could be very differently than what we've seen before. There may be some nuances. So take us through that process.
So federal employees should get a couple of documents. One is an SF-8, and it's very obviously an unemployment document. It says, bring this to your unemployment agency at the top of it. So that's a very obvious document that you need. The other is SF-50, which is your separation reason. You should get a new SF-50 anytime your employment status changes at all when you get a promotion. So federal employees should be familiar with the SF-50. They need to bring that with them to substantiate the reason for separation. And then contractors should just get 18 months of their past state pay stubs. They're not going to get an SF-8 or an SF-15. And then finally, in the circumstance that military members get laid off, they also get a form to bring with them to the unemployment insurance office.
Now, I want to clarify that you are to file based on where you work, because I've heard this question before, where you work, not where you live.
Exactly. You have to apply where your duty station is. Since the pandemic, some people have been assigned a duty station that is outside of the district, which is sometimes even their home address. I'm hearing from a lot of people. So wherever your duty station is, that's where you're supposed to apply.
And I want to circle back around about the workers who took the buyout. Just for clarification, would they qualify for unemployment?
As with most unemployment questions, the answer is it depends, and it's going to vary on a case-by-case basis. If they took the voluntary buyout and they are indeed getting paid, they're very likely to be considered unemployed because they're getting a weekly payment, and they would have to report that anyway, and it would offset whatever their unemployment benefit would be if they were deemed unemployed. Once they stop getting paid, that's where the question comes in. If they stop getting paid before the end of the agreement, I think they have a pretty good case to make that they've now been involuntarily separated. State agencies are also looking at the circumstances under which they took the fork in the road. And, those circumstances may have been under extreme duress. So, maybe they knew they would be fired because they're being asked to return to the office and their duty station is in the middle of Pennsylvania somewhere. So, it all depends on the circumstances. What I would advise is that people don't make their eligibility determination on their own, that once they stop getting paid, they work with their state unemployment insurance agency to make sure that to find out if they're eligible.
And let's talk about the federal contractors who have lost their jobs. What is the process for them?
So their process is going to be like anyone else who becomes unemployed through no fault of their own. And I can provide a list of state unemployment insurance agencies. They should also apply wherever their employer is located, not necessarily where they live, unless they've been told otherwise.
Are you hearing, so, we've had people that are already filing. What are some of the complications that you're hearing from people, or some of the hiccups that you're hearing from people, that you can kind of help people navigate through these spaces, or any issues that they're experiencing that you want to prepare people for ahead of time? If you think it's going to work the normal way, things are changing. What are some of those things that you're hearing from people on the ground?
So I got a report from one state agency that they were being given two choices on an attestation form, fork or no, and there wasn't an option to say yes to the attestation. So when that happens, just let the state agency know they don't want that to be incorrect. Don't answer questions that you don't understand without getting some help. Particularly for some of the low-income folks, people who aren't making a lot as contractors, legal state and district legal aid agencies are there to support you. Reach out to them. They're going to be very busy also now, but legal aid and legal services have been a tremendous resource for unemployed people.
I guess, you just said it. As these numbers begin to tick up, which we really probably haven't even begun to feel the effects of what's about to happen, there is going to be a shortage of people being able to reach or contact people, because there's going to be such a flood of questions and issues, and we don't know what this infrastructure is going to exactly look like. And it's hard to tell people to be patient, especially during the time when many people, it's life and death for them. People who have health issues, people who desperately need this in order to literally survive. How can they lean into even put pressure? Because some of this is trying to figure out what the agency is going to do, but then also right now it is up to sometimes many Americans to speak out and put pressure on their local governments to help with efficiency.
I think local governments is one place, but I also think, states are waiting for guidance from the federal government, putting pressure on the federal government to clarify what all of this, what all is happening and what this means, because I think that they're the biggest chaos agent right at this point. There's really, there's a vibe in DC that is not feeling great. I mean, I think even people who haven't been laid off are feeling pressure. They're very nervous. This is just such an extraordinary circumstance that I think, not just pressuring your state governments, who may be already doing a lot to help workers. I know that DC just rolled out an assistance page for federal workers. Maryland has had a really good frequently asked questions up for a while. I mean, I think that the state agencies are doing everything they can. I think that they need some assistance from the federal government. You should reach out to your federal policymakers, state elected officials. It's time to sound the alarm. Everybody should be making a lot of phone calls right now.
What are some of the potential consequences that you see for state budgets when these claims surge on the state level? What are you sounding the alarm about? I want to follow up with that about those who have not been fired, those who have not received any type of notice. Is there any way that they should begin to prepare?
Right. So, one thing that I'm hearing from folks is I'm kind of doing okay right now. I think I won't apply for unemployment because this is a fund for somebody else. No, it is a fund for you. If you're getting regular unemployment insurance, employers have paid into this. They've paid taxes. There is a trust fund. It's available for you. You are entitled to these benefits. If you're a federal worker, these benefits will be reimbursed by the federal government, hopefully, if the federal government behaves like it's supposed to.
That part, Michele, that's the part that I feel like almost after every sentence we have to say supposedly or allegedly or supposed to, because we just don't know what the fallout's going to look like.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. And so I do think that people should feel empowered to apply for the benefits that they deserve, and understand that there are funds available for this purpose, that they've worked, their employer has paid into in lieu of paying them more every week. So definitely people should apply if they think they're eligible.
How long does unemployment last, and typically how much can a worker expect?
Right. So unemployment is 26 weeks in most states. There are a few states that have reduced the benefit below 26 weeks, as low as 12 weeks in North Carolina and Florida. The maximum weekly benefit is very low. Unfortunately, in Washington, D.C., it's $444 per week. In Maryland, it's $430. And in Virginia, it's $378. This isn't sufficient to live on. If I were the king of the world, I would tell Congress right now, please increase the weekly benefit like we did during COVID. To ensure that this economic pain doesn't swell to epic proportions. I'm already, if you go on Washington, D.C. boards on Facebook, Reddit, places like that, there are people who are contractors, right? Who home improvement contractors who have suddenly been told, hey, we're pushing back our project. We're not doing it. Even from people who are employed, like that economic uncertainty spreads. Hardware stores are going to feel it. Local grocery stores, local restaurants, everybody's going to start to feel this because benefits aren't sufficient.
I'm always thinking about how it's going to affect the housing industry, whether we're going to see a moratorium. And I'm glad you referenced COVID, because I'm just waiting and looking to see whether we're going to see some of those things put in place that we saw during COVID to help stabilize, so there won't be a collapse. But we really haven't heard much on that. But I want to talk about, can you explain how a federal workers' unemployment benefit differs from those of private sector workers, because there's a difference there?
Yeah, they really aren't different. They're paid in the same way. The big difference is that most times employers pay taxes on all of their employees to the state agency. So the state agency is going to have a wage record. So the state agency, when the unemployed person comes in, they'll have a rough idea how much they earned. They know where they worked. They know what their title was, right? So you've got some corroborating information. So it makes it easier for the state agency to determine how much money you should get in a weekly benefit, and that you are indeed a person. You are indeed a person who had a job with a certain employer. With federal employees, because it's reimbursable, which means the federal government pays back all of the benefits that gets paid out, the agency doesn't have a wage record. So it doesn't have any information on federal employees. So that's what makes the SF8 and SF50 all the more important.
And if you're denied, if the claims that you're putting in are denied, what is the process that you can go through to redress those issues? And you slightly went over some reasons why someone would be denied, but are there any more reasons why people could be denied?
Well, they might be denied because, on cursory evaluation, the agency thinks you were fired for gross misconduct, for example. Then there is an appeal process available in all 53 states and territories that allows people to get more information to the state agency about the reason they were separated or about how much they earned. I've been hearing that federal workers are getting notices that they're fired for performance reasons. That's a very normal reason to get unemployment. Very often employers hire somebody, they're not a good fit, they let them go and hire somebody else. Many people who are currently receiving unemployment insurance were fired for a reason. As long as it's not gross misconduct, they should still get unemployment. It sometimes triggers an additional investigation, But I have a feeling when state agencies start getting the same form letter over and over and over again, saying tens of thousands of people were fired for performance, maybe that won't trigger the extra investigation for each individual.
And if you're denied, though, what is the process that you go through if you're denied?
You just go back to the state agency and file an appeal. It should be, the state agency should give you information on how to appeal a denial. Whenever you get a denial, you get more information about appeals.
Just a couple of more questions, Michele. One, how likely do you believe that it is that states will end up having to adjust their unemployment insurance policies or eligibility criteria in response to all of these layoffs?
Well, one thing that happened in North Carolina when there was a big hurricane in the fall, the governor unilaterally increased benefits by $250 a week. I do think states might want to look at their maximum weekly benefit amounts to make sure that their system is still providing a counter-cyclical benefit.
Absolutely. I want to now go down to, let's talk about some support resources. As people are listening, they're getting the information and they're like, where do I go? Where can I find out more information? What are the support resources that are available for states to manage these effects of large-scale federal layoffs on unemployment systems, and also resources for listeners who are trying to get more information on what they need to do to deal with this fallout?
Mass layoffs are not unusual. Mass layoffs of this size are, but mass layoffs happen. And states have rapid response units that are accustomed to getting information out to people. So, the state agencies do have resources for folks. It might take a little while to get to them. I would imagine states are going to be having town halls. The state of Maryland, some states have, put up an entire, they have sessions that you can attend that have been scheduled. So definitely attend those. Definitely work with legal aid and legal services, particularly if you're on the low end of the income spectrum. And, during COVID, groups kind of popped up all over the internet. I would be, these are good groups to follow, but maybe be a little bit careful with those because those have been associated with phishing attempts where they say, if you can't get through to the state agency, call this number instead and give them your social security number. Don't do that.
No, I'm glad you said that because I did want to end with anytime we saw during COVID, we see it during a lot of times when there's any type of disaster or issue that's happening, whether it's federal, state, or local, we always see these scams starting to come up. So just very quickly, are you seeing any other things like that happen that you want to put people on notice and tell them to beware of during this time? Because there are many who are waiting to profit off of people's misfortune.
Yeah, another common scam is that the scammers will find a bank of phone numbers and will reach out to people and say, hey, we're the state unemployment insurance agency. There's a problem with your claim. Click this and go fill out all of your information. And they just basically hijack an existing claim and with new bank information. States have gotten a lot more savvy about this, and they're now doing more to check against bank records to make sure that that bank account belongs to you. But don't click on those things. If you need to do business with a state unemployment insurance agency, go straight to the state unemployment insurance agency.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michele Evermore, Senior Fellow at the National Academy of Social Insurance. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for those who are listening on today. Thank you for listening to The Drum. And Harold Fisher, we'll be back on with the Daily Drum. I want to make sure that people stay tuned for the next show. My name is Ebony McMorris, and I have had a good time sitting in for Harold Fisher, but he will be back. Thank you for my guest today. Today is Monday, and it is March the 3rd. Time is going by so fast. I'm Ebony McMorris. Harold Fisher returns. Up next, the original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon on 96.3 WHUR. Thank you so much.